Hello, how are you all feeling? Still awake? And thank you, Fred. I couldn't really agree more with you. I really couldn't. Isn't it a crazy world we're living in today, quite honestly? You know, honestly, I hate most advertising out there. And I don't know if you know Kelloggs, the founder of Adbuster. I think he coined it quite well. He said, advertising is the biggest psychological experiment ever carried out on human mankind. And if you're in doubt, he didn't mean that in a good way. And I can kind of say that because I actually spent 15 years of my life working in advertising. And I started out as a young copywriter, 21 years old, pretty naive probably. The reason why I did it, pretty simple, 2 reasons. The paycheck, pretty good. Secondly, you're traveling around the world to do commercial shoots on a tropical island. It's all great. I smartened up a little bit. So what I want to talk about here today is really how to hack advertising, how to do something better, but also how to hack our consumerist mindsets. Because I think what we're doing today, it's crazy. We're polluting mindsets, and we're polluting the planet we're living on. So what I'm going to talk about is what I call Goodvertising. So I'm on a change mission here to create a better version of advertising. But I also think that I'm on a mission to change myself, because quite honestly, most of the time, I'm also just a dumb consumerist zombie. I am. I should know better. I worked in advertising. I should know better. But most of the time, when I walk down the street, for some weird reason, I see all these brands. Of course, there's people behind them, but everybody's kind of like a walking billboard these days. You know, if you really think about what all these brands are telling us. So when I see a guy driving down the street in his Mercedes, it kind of shouts to me, you know, I'm rich and powerful. Or you have the guy sitting there with his Apple MacBook, and it just shouts, I was dumb enough to pay $4,000 to look cool and creative. So that's what advertising does, right? And, you know, when I go down in the supermarket, and again, I should know better, I go into my zombie mode, my consumerist zombie mode, and I go down there, I'm going for a toothpaste, buying a toothpaste. I know they're pretty much basically the same, all 10 toothpaste. But because the advertising told me that it's the red one, it's the Colgate I'm going for, I kind of do that on autopilot. Think about how many decisions you take on autopilot. And that brainless activity is actually branding. So what I think is interesting now is that, you know, if you look at something like cosmetic ads, I don't know why I think cosmetics ads are quite fun. You know, they promise you things like, some of the ladies in this room must recognize this, you know, internal youth, skin like a baby. I'm like, why do we actually believe that stuff? Still, why do we believe that stuff? Why do we believe those advertised lies? And I think the answer is quite simple, and I think it's good to remember. I think we actually believe those lies because we have pretty boring lives. We do. We have pretty boring lives. I have a pretty boring life. And I think what advertising does is it tries to add more interesting dimensions to our lives. So we can dream a little bit. So we can, you know, we all know Brad Pitt, he probably got a pretty interesting life, right? So we can buy the same hair product as him, or we can wear the same jeans as him, and we have a little bit of that dream. So we can live in our little advertised bubble, and it's so nice to be in that little advertised bubble. Because as L'Oreal says, because I'm worth it. So that's the world of advertising. But suddenly we're here at Sustainable Brands, and you know, even the consumerist zombie in me sometimes get a little bit shaken because stories are coming out. Companies are starting a dialogue about things they didn't talk about just a while ago. So the other day, I'm from Denmark, we have a big fashion industry. So they came out and they said, you know what, your clothing is full of toxic chemicals. Fashion company went out and said that. And I was like, what? You know, if I went out and I said, I've been poisoning my girlfriend's food over the last period. I probably wouldn't be calling in a press conference. I probably wouldn't be writing a report about it. So I think it's a pretty crazy world we're living in. Another example, down in the supermarket, I don't know if there's anybody from Kelloggs here. I was down in the supermarket, I had to buy some breakfast cereal. So I go through the aisles in the supermarket, and the interesting thing is, if you actually know the history of Kelloggs, they invented the cornflakes. They actually did that at a health sanatorium. So you would think they come from this interesting, healthy background. And then in the supermarket aisle, I come across Kellogg's Cocoa Pops. Do you all know Kellogg's Cocoa Pops? Yeah? Good. That little cute monkey just looking at me, trying to lure small kids to buy it. And I'm like, in the aisle with breakfast cereals, it's candy. It's got the same sugar content as a Snickers chocolate bar. What is it doing there? What are companies thinking about when they're doing this stuff? And then what's really interesting is then when we talk about, these words, we try to hide it behind these words like sustainability, materiality, corporate social responsibility. So we invent these words not to talk about the stuff that it really is, sugar that makes kids fat, or, polluted air, or whatever it is. Why don't we say that? It's interesting, if you look at the military, when they drop a bomb and kill 100 people, they call it a campaign. They hide it behind these nice words. And I think the dangerous wake-up call now is that, truth can be ignored for a while, but it cannot be denied. And I think I'm probably not the only little dumb consumerist zombie that is waking up these days. And this is just one survey. Some of you might have seen it from Havas. And I think it's quite interesting that it says that 2/3 of people don't care whether the majority of brands are around tomorrow or not. So they actually don't care whether you guys here in the room are around tomorrow or not. That should be a wake-up call. Do we deserve it? Probably. But the good thing is, we've actually been given a second chance. You're not always given a second chance in life, but you guys are lucky today. They also say that 70% of people actually believe that it's the role of businesses and brands to come up with solutions to some of these challenges, whether that is obesity, climate change, unemployment. What a wonderful opportunity, right? What a wonderful opportunity. And I think we're actually here to talk about this stuff, these efforts. What are you guys really doing? How are you involving me in this journey that you guys are on? Where is the effort? Where is the effort? And I think what most companies do these days is talk a lot about, goals, 20 goals, 2020 goals, 2030 goals. We're going to change this in 2050, right? You've probably all heard that. So, just imagine if I come home and my girlfriend catches me cheating on her. This is fictional, right? So she catches me cheating on her, and I say, relax, honey, you know what? What I'm going to do now is I'm going to phase out my adultery over the next 5 years. So in 2020, you're going to have 100% adultery-free Thomas Kolster. You think that would work? Girls, would that work? Probably I'd pick the phone up afterwards and say, yeah, I chatted with my girlfriend, it's okay. Yeah, I'll be over later. So why do you treat your customers like that? The millions of people who actually love you, or who actually used to love you, why do you treat them like that? If you sell to people, they'll treat you like a sales guy, and I think Fred talked quite a bit about that. If you show care towards people, they'll treat you like a friend. But these days, they actually need more than a friend. They need a hero. And I think we all know the story of the hero, right? A hero like Superman that flies around the world so fast so he can reverse time. And you can take that role. But quite honestly, it's not the role that I see in most storytelling, in most marketing out there, unfortunately. The corporate Superman that I'm seeing is kind of different Superman. So just an example. So corporate Superman hears that the rainforest is being cut down and orangutans are being killed. Scenario, right? What does the corporate Superman do? He kind of slowly wakes up, stretches his body, he puts on his red cape, it's kind of blowing in the wind. He goes down to the supermarket and he picks up a product, the product that's responsible for cutting down the rainforest and killing off those orangutans. He looks at it and he puts a label on it. He puts it back and he goes to bed. That's the corporate Superman. And that's not the hero. I think that's not the hero that you guys should aspire towards. You know, you all seen James Bond, right? James Bond, we all know how that goes, right? James Bond is up against an evil villain that's greedy and goes after the gold. And the reason he does that, and the villain is trying to, you know, kill humanity and kill the planet. And I think that's a plot. That's a plot that we probably all pretty much know. A planet that needs saving, a humanity that needs saving. So I think you guys have an immense possibility to tell these stories of change. And I think there's lots of stories that can be told. You know, open today's newspaper, there's lots of things that you can fix. Or look down in the supermarket trolley of horrible stories, if that's palm oil, if that's cancerous ingredients. All those things can be used as a conversation point with your customers. So what I think is interesting is that all these stories can also do what I think is interesting, to hack, to shut off the autopilot of that dumb consumerist zombie. Let me give you an example. You all know Body Shop, right? So before, you'd have cosmetic companies and they would talk about, you know, skin like a baby and the internal youth. But suddenly Body Shop came out there and they talked about a completely different story, about animal cruelty. So they suddenly distanced themselves completely from their competitors by telling a different story, but actually wanting to solve something in our lives. And let me give you another example. P&G, probably all know it, the big marketing machine. This was the advertising they used to run just a year ago for their Always brand. You know, with classical functional messages, you know, a hurricane sucking power like a hurricane, or this mad scientist stuff with blue or green ink. We kind of like to believe those lies still, right? But suddenly they went on another course, and they wanted actually to talk about how we treat young girls with these stereotypes. And they wanted to bring on a new conversation. They wanted to give girls, young girls, more confidence, and they launched the Like a Girl campaign. And some of you might be sitting there and saying, yeah, but aren't they just doing that to sell more products? And of course, but I think, isn't that better than what they did before, preying on girls' insecurities? I don't think we have time for the second case, Chipotle. But what I think here is that you have every chance to step in there and be a hero in people's lives. You have every chance to shock and to shut off my autopilot and the consumerist zombie walk. And I think the interesting part is that suddenly you can move your brand from just talking about, you know, these functional benefits, price and quality, moving it up to be more aspirational, to actually creating something that's purposeful and that's meaningful. Suddenly, it's not about these advertised lies anymore, because suddenly you want to make a real, genuine difference in people's lives. And I think, for me, I think that's brand heaven. That should be brand heaven for every brand out there. And it brings marketing, it brings storytelling into the heart of the company, into the boardroom, because you're dealing with some of the biggest challenges that these companies are facing. Advertising sells us dreams, it sells us aspirations, those lies. What I believe Goodvertising can do is not tell you a story about more or less, but about something better. You know, just imagine a Rio where you can swim in the rivers, where our kids can play safely on the street, where clothing doesn't contain toxic ingredients. I think that's a better story. I know how the human mind works, and probably all I've told you, you'll forget tomorrow, because it's much easier. It's much easier to go behind your desk and do whatever else you normally do. But what I've done here is I've brought 5 guidelines with me. And what I'd encourage you to do is actually take up your iPhone and take a picture of it. Because one day, when you don't want to sleepwalk anymore, you can actually look at this little list and hopefully you can be on your road to creating a meaningful brand. The great scientist Albert Einstein, he once defined insanity as doing the same things over and over and over and over again, but expecting a different outcome. The theme of today's sustainable brands is how now. I know that all of you in this room actually know the how part. So I think it's about time that we live up to this role and we become a hero in people's lives, and we do that now. No more postponing. So this is all in your hands, and I wish you the best of luck.